At Press Pause Radio, we used to focus really heavily on the indie scene back in 2010. Embracing this indie spirit, 2 special episodes were made for Bullet Heaven in Series 2 and 3 called Indie 3. Each would feature 3 Xbox indie games in 3 streamlined reviews, and all for the combined total cost of $3. Well, the cost for these kinds of games aren't especially thematic anymore, but the indie spirit is still there, so we're bringing Indie 3 back after almost 10 years. It's time to dive into 3 all-new indies on Steam. What makes them tick? How do they shake things up? And are they worth playing? Let's take a closer look. TechBeat Heart is a timed score attack style shooting game released for Windows PC, SteamOS, and Linux on September 13th, 2021 from Lost Machine Games. The idea behind this game is simple enough. Players take on a randomized onslaught of corrupted machines protecting the game's sole boss, the Black Heart. Players control their ship with Heart 8 control and come ready equipped with a rapid shot and a devastating super attack. There are also a number of weapons that can be collected to enhance the player's offensive capabilities, each of which have their own unique super attack variants. They often look pretty cool. Players have a limited amount of time to deal with these enemies, and when it counts all the way down, the Black Heart will appear. There are some interesting wrinkles that add a bit of variety to the gameplay though. First up is the combo gauge. Getting a high enough combo will add additional time to the player's run, giving them an opportunity to score higher. A 40 combo gives the player 10 extra seconds, a 90 combo 20 seconds, and a 99 combo awards the player with a point bonus. This combo will be maintained so long as the depleting gauge beside the combo count isn't empty. Combos will also fill the special attack gauge as well, so maintaining the combo will allow for more specials to be used more often. Next up is the multiplayer-based scoring system. Taking out a specific number of enemies of the same type will reward the player with the chance at increasing a global multiplier. As an enemy is defeated, a white gauge will fill around the enemy type in question. When it fills completely, a white multiplier item is dropped, which needs to be collected. Miss it, and the multiplier increase will not be applied. The multiplier is also increased by collecting weapon pickups, which accompany a point bonus. While some weapons are obviously better than others, like the flamethrower and laser, getting the most points as quickly as possible will require every weapon to be collected. With this in mind, mastery with all weapon types is probably a good idea. Players have only 1 life to make it all the way through TechBeat Heart, and we get why this is. This is a very short game, even among other shoot-'em-ups, especially if you're only playing for survival. Anything more than 1 life might make things a little too easy overall. Not that the Black Heart is any slouch though, it's particularly brutal. TechBeat Heart also has an instantly recognizable style to it. Just as with a game like Zero Ranger, even the most vague description of this game can tell someone who has seen it just once, even in passing, which game you're talking about. With an easy-to-follow menu system, a trippy background akin to Tempest, and detailed sprites that even telegraph their attacks, TechBeat Heart looks absolutely wild. It sounds great too, with the player's choice of 2 different but equally bopping soundtracks. We did notice a specific explosion effect that sounded identical to one found in Luftrausers though. If you know, you know. While an online leaderboard doesn't exist within the game itself, the player can still rank in on the Steam leaderboards for both their achieved score or enemy kills. It's a little less convenient to check the player's rankings quickly, but at least it's there. So, all good, but there are a few issues we encountered throughout our time with it that made things maybe a little too difficult for the wrong reasons. For one, the movement control isn't quite as swift as we would have liked. Everything from the enemies to their shots to bonuses and weapon drops are very fast compared to the speed at which the player can get around. Some issues exist with some of the enemies as well, including shots that can be fired at the player from well off screen after an enemy has left the playfield, while at other times they fire immediately as they enter with no telegraphing. Thankfully, Lost Machine is aware of these issues and will be implementing fixes. The final complaint we have is just how big everything is. We get that the hitbox on the player's ship is very small in relation to the giant player sprite, but all of the enemies are also very big as well, which makes for a very crowded play area. Paired with the sluggish ship speed, we can't help but wonder what a version of this game with smaller hazards and sprites might feel like. Maybe a minimized mode could be added later down the line. At the end of the day though, while TechBeat Heart may have its share of minor issues, especially with how crowded it feels, it's still a decent pick up and play game, and it's well worth playing. Initially released in February 2020, EXTRAGALACTICA is an early access title currently under development for Windows PC and Mac OS by Digital Yogurt and published by Ghost Street Games. Its main story mode is projected to be completed in 2022, with a versus mode coming soonish, but in the meantime, its infinite score attack mode, EXTRAGALACTICA Infinite, is fully playable, complete with leaderboard support. As the name of this specific mode implies, EXTRAGALACTICA Infinite tasks players with lasting as long as possible against a barrage of randomly deployed baddies through progressively difficult waves. As new waves are reached, new enemies will appear to challenge the player with more complex attacks and movement patterns. The control in EXTRAGALACTICA might cause issues with some players as there is an emphasis on analog inputs. Tilt all the way for the fastest movement, tilt just a little for more precise dodges. It is possible to play the game with an arcade stick, but it gets pretty unwieldy as movement is all or nothing in an absurdly fast kind of way. Additionally, we found that using a DualShock 4 was more balanced than an Xbox One controller. This is on account of the analogs on the Xbox pad being way too sensitive and twiddly. EXTRAGALACTICA often gets pretty intense pretty quickly. The player's basic rapid shot does an adequate job of dealing with most enemies on the outset of the game. Players also have a shield stock of 3 units that will be reduced by 1 unit if the player collides with an enemy, bullet, or obstacle. There are often times when the player will get just a little overwhelmed, and this can lead to enemies escaping unharmed. Any of these enemies will end up attacking the planet Celestro in the background. Its life gauge can be found in the top left-hand corner of the screen, and when it's reduced to 0, it's game over. Thankfully, a number of mechanics will help the player not only dish the pain and save the planet, but also make it further while climbing those leaderboards. Like we saw in TechBeat Heart, enemy kills play a huge part in how the game rewards the player. In this case, consecutive enemy kills will increase the player's skill tier, which will increase the number and speed of the shots they fire, as well as enabling special attacks like missiles. These tiers are indicated in the skill streak gauge in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. The barrel wave attack is also available to the player right on the outset of the game, which is dependent on a gauge in the center of the HUD at the bottom of the screen. If it's used too much too quickly, it will need to go through a cooldown phase, but it always recharges regardless of how many times in a row it's been used. So players can be strategic with it. It will trigger automatically, but can also be switched to manual, which is essentially the game's hard mode. Early into building the player's skill tiers, an ability known as Retro Dash will be enabled, indicated by a set of bars in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. In Retro Dash, players will slow down time in an effort to move through dense enemy opposition, shots, or fast-moving hazards, or to deal a ton of damage in a hurry. While the player's shots are slowed down in terms of rapid fire, the player can manually pop off as many shots as they can, which will blast forward to hit their targets almost all at once. This, in conjunction with the barrel wave, is super handy against mid-bosses. At maximum tier, the player will enter Super G, which greatly enhances the player's firepower, but there's even more to it. Holding down the barrel wave button in Super G will enable the superpowered Death Spiral, which more or less allows players to crash into anything directly for massive damage. Timing Super G with bosses makes for a very, very fast kill in this regard. Super G also allows for a screen-clearing attack that can even one-shot bosses, but the player will be reduced to default levels if this is done. Additionally, while clearing a boss fight normally will allow the player to recover their shield stock by 1 unit, using this super attack will forfeit this bonus. The player will only be able to chill out in Super G for a limited amount of time though, indicated by the ever-depleting skill streak gauge. And, as with any other tier, if the player gets hit in any sort of way, they'll be reduced to basic firepower. Players can also randomly chance upon skill cubes, which can be shot for an additional skill point, and mystery boxes with a ton of different effects. These include, but are not limited to, unlimited retro dash, faster or slower enemy speed or spawn times, extra skill points, reduction in skill points, and more. What will you get? Shit. With competitive online leaderboards, EXTRAGALACTICA Infinite makes for a fun time. Scoring high can be done in a few ways, chief among them involving multipliers triggered by mines and black holes. Blasting away space rocks will often leave a destructible unit behind that will either explode or create a black hole. The more these are shot, the wider the radius will be and the more enemies can get caught in the blast or suck zone. The total number of enemies defeated by the explosion that results will reward the player with a multiplier that is applied to the score values for each enemy destroyed. With a bit of care, this multiplier can reach double digits. In the case of black holes, enemies will get sucked in and normal point values apply, but players can also duck into them, resulting in a cursor appearing. When the cursor is where the player wants it, they can press the Y button on an Xbox pad or the triangle button on a PlayStation controller to burst out of subspace, to damage enemies and bosses and trigger multipliers where applicable. A number of additional score bonuses are also awarded at the end of the player's run for various criteria. Its presentation is also solid with a decent UI and some great backgrounds and visuals. The backgrounds in specific are reminiscent of a classic LCD screen or perhaps a very high-resolution PC CRT. The sound is also great with jammin' tunes, solid effects, and an exuberant announcer that really gives his all. The player can even use obtained skill points to upgrade their weapons with flashy skins. Flashback is our favorite, though Star Spangled and Love Bug are also fan favorites. However, there are some downsides to the package as it stands as well, mostly due to its unfinished nature. As an aside, there are also some tweaks being added to the game in an upcoming patch to balance out the analog sensitivity, as well as changing up at least the spooky weapon system's presentation. All in all, even though EXTRAGALACTICA is still missing features and modes, its infinite mode is still highly competitive and totally worth playing. Hellblasters was developed and published by PlayShift Games, seeing release on October 7th, 2021. It's a relatively straightforward vertical bullet hell shooting game that features a more modern 9:16 aspect ratio that allows for non-stretched full-screen tate on today's 16:9 monitors. On the outset of the game, players have access to two different characters sporting different ships and playstyles. Winter pilots a sleek pointy jet with a nimble speed, fast rapid shot, and a narrow cone of fire. Meanwhile, Summer pilots a more broad, slower jet with a wider field of fire but a slower shot rate. Both of these characters can focus their fire into a narrow, powerful column while slowing their movement cave style. Players also have access to a limited bomber stock that can be deployed in a pinch to avoid getting hit with rogue shots. However, using bombs can impact the score, as we'll soon see. The easier difficulties also have an auto-bomber function, allowing players additional chances for survival without the loss of a life until they're all used up. Each character also has access to a special attack that can be used to not only damage enemies but also clear away their bullets. Winter will launch a fast, wide bullet downrange, while Summer will engage a powerful laser beam. These abilities are dependent on an energy gauge that can be tracked with a circular gauge around the player's ship. It can be recharged through bullet collisions with enemies and certain obstacles. If this is performed close enough, stars will appear where their bullets make contact with the target, allowing for this energy to charge even faster. Destroying enemies and clearing bullets with special attacks will build a chain counter in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So long as the gauge below the counter isn't empty, the chain will be maintained, and it will instantly fill so long as bullets are striking enemies or certain emplacements. One quick thing to keep in mind. Enemies that result in a screen-wide bullet clear will only contribute to this counter with their destruction and not the bullets that they clear. Any stage can be timed in such a way that the chain can be carried all the way through, resulting in a decent point payout. This is critical in achieving extends, the amount remaining of which is displayed in the sidebar in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Additional bonuses are awarded at stage end and arcade end score attack for the amount of bombs remaining in the stock, a no miss, a no bomb, and a double score multiplier if the stage is cleared with a maxed out 5-unit life stock. Hellblasters is chock full of features. A story mode has players make their way through the game at their own pace, section by section. With over 32 stages that include story and training segments, there's plenty to play. The story mode is fleshed out with an overarching plot as well, chronicling the exploits of the Hellblasters in their sorties, complete with retro-style cutscenes. Meanwhile, Arcade takes all of these small segments, strips away the plot, and combines them into a set of 5 traditional stages. Each stage is of a decent length and even on normal delivers a challenge that most intermediate players will enjoy. This is where players looking to get the most out of Hellblaster's gameplay mechanics will find the most value. There's even a caravan-style score attack mode that tasks players with scoring as high as possible within a time limit. Every mode of play also sports 4 difficulties ranging from the super easy and hilariously titled Journalist mode to hard. Easy is plenty balanced to get a feel for the game, and normal serves up a decent challenge. Hard is hard, but suitable for those getting through unscathed in normal. It's definitely a mode that can absolutely be worked up to. Hellblasters even features a timed caravan-style score attack mode. Hellblasters also features online leaderboards for every mode and every difficulty as well, allowing anyone of any walk of life and skill to rank in and climb the ladder. The only real downside to this game are the visuals. In general, they're fairly weak. That's not a terribly big issue as it plays well enough and enemy bullets are clear to see, but the ship designs, enemies, backgrounds, and most of the bosses leave a bit to be desired. The hand-drawn character art in the sidebars and galleries are great though. The sound isn't terrible either, but it's still on the weaker side of things, especially compared to the two others we've taken a look at today. Still plenty serviceable, but on the weak side nonetheless. The short of the long of it is, of these three games, Hellblasters is the most fully featured of the lot, and while it may lack audiovisual polish, which is fine, the approach it takes for arcade, story, and score attack gameplay are solid, and the gameplay itself works well. Hellblasters is well worth playing. And there you have it, 3 solid indies you can check out right now for your PC. Links for all of them can be found below. So what do you think? Should we revisit the Indie 3 formula more often? Let us know in the comments below. Up next, we're taking a look at a Mega Drive classic. And it came out of nowhere. Advanced Buster Hawk Goulet Lancer is coming up next on Bullet Heaven. We'll see you all in the next episode.